Hello, I'm Robert, a fact checker and science blogger, and this is to help people scared of things like Covid-19, and this is how you could stop it spreading and stop yourself getting it. And if everyone did this, it would be extinct in the wild in 14 days. There's quite simple instructions. You have to wash your hands carefully and thoroughly. And that's including between the fingers and the tips of your toe fingers and the nails and the back of your hands and everything, and your wrists and everything. And then you've also got to get out of the habit of touching your face. And especially your eyes, nose, mouth. It doesn't matter the rest of your face, you can scratch yourself if you need to. But it's probably for most people it's easiest to just remember not to touch your face. The reason is that this virus, it's very easily, soapy water, like with most viruses, soapy water just kills it, just destroys it. In fact, it's not even alive, it's just a virus. It's just a gene sequence with some protein on it, and it's very easily destroyed. It can't get through your skin, this particular virus. It's not a contact virus. The only way it can get into your body and infect you is through your eyes, your nose, or your mouth. And it's either by touching you or by you touch something and then touch your mouth, nose, or eyes, or you have close contact with someone else, for instance, they cough in your face. So the other thing you have to do is keep a distance from someone else. If there's anyone else who's coughing, sneezing, or you think could be sick with the disease. And 1 or 2 meters is enough to stop the cough. Now, this is not an airborne disease. It's not like SARS. So people with SARS, then they go flying back and they would be infect other people in the same plane. In fact, even not just the seat behind, before and behind, but almost anywhere in a plane could get infected with SARS. This does not happen with Covid-19. Dozens of people have flown back from Wuhan, and even before they knew that there was any chance of it infecting anyone, and they haven't infected anyone. So it's not easy to get this. And so if you follow the instructions, you won't get it. And so you need to wash your hands frequently and thoroughly. You need to get out of the habit of touching your face when you're out and about, especially. You can if you're in a place where you know there isn't Covid-19, and you can do it if you wash your hands first before touching your face. And then you also should disinfect surfaces if you're working with them, and you should wash your hands. If you've got delicate skin, don't worry too much. You don't need to be washing your hands frequently unless you're frequently touching your face or doing something else that could somehow infect you. So you've got to wash your hands before cooking, while making food, and then after you've finished cooking, you've got to wash your hands before eating and after you go to the toilet, and then after you return from your work, school, or shopping. If you do that, you won't get it, and you're also helping to stop it spreading. And then if you cough or sneeze, cough into an elbow, or you use a tissue and dispose it into a closed bin. And there you are. And this is Dr. Bruce Aylward, and he did this, and he went all the way through the worst places in China, including Wuhan, and he could say quite confidently that he is not a contact. And here he is talking without any protection, and he said, if I had Covid-19, or if I was a contact, I would not be here. I wouldn't be sitting here with the mask. That makes no sense, he said. But I am not a contact. He didn't have to go through quarantine. They knew that he's as a top expert, that he knew what he was doing, and that he's not a contact. If you do the same as he did, then you're not a contact, even if you're living in the same house as someone with Covid-19. And so now I just want to talk a little bit about this. Yes, first, most people recover. So at the moment, at the moment we could go and look at this, the app. Where's the proper one? Bring up the this one. Yeah, this is the big academic one. The other ones are as well, but I do use this one just because it's developed academically, and it's kind of very authoritative. The other ones give the same figures. You can just double check. So if you look at that, 126 confirmed, 68,000 have recovered, been 4,000 deaths. However, you've got to be a little cautious about that. That would look like you've got 5% have died. But it's actually most of these 126,000 are going to recover. So here's a figure here. Where is it? Oh, I've got it embedded here, never mind. I can find it. So most people recover. So there you are. The problem is, and these are the deaths, and these are the recoveries. The thing is that the deaths happen very early on compared to the recoveries. It takes about a couple of weeks if you have an advanced version, a severe reaction effect. Then it takes a couple of weeks, 10 days or more before you die. But then if you're a very severe case and the doctors save you from dying, then you can be on a ventilator or artificial lungs for 6 weeks or more. And very few die. As it goes on, then you get beyond the point at which most people are dying, and then you start recovering and getting better. And at that stage of your disease, you're still on the ventilator, and it takes ages and ages to recover properly and to go all the way back up. And that is why the recoveries they're lacking after the deaths. But in actuality, most people, so 80% get a very mild disease. So just very quickly explain how this works. This is a respiratory disease that has an affinity for the lower parts of your lungs. And if you only get in the upper part, you get a very mild disease because the virus just doesn't like it up there very much. And very few people even get a runny nose, about 4%. You get a fever, you get a dry cough, if it starts coming down, you start coughing, and and it's only if it goes really deep in your lungs that you then start getting this very severe disease because it likes it down there. And so 80% it just never gets down there, not in significant numbers, and they're over it quite quickly. So have a listen to this lady, for instance. She had it so mild she never really felt unwell. And then this is an example of some severe cases. They had it pretty bad. And so you can, I'll link to this in the video description. You can go and watch these videos. But most never progressed to that point. But they got it pretty bad and then they got over it. They're anonymous. So you just see their silhouettes. And it's quite hard to find examples of people who talk about recovery because there's quite a lot of stigma of people who've had it, although there shouldn't be. And it's really hard to get this. As I said, it's not airborne, and it only spreads to close and prolonged contacts. So you may know that the Chinese and everyone now with any sense, the more sensible governments are contact tracing everyone. And if they've got the disease, they just trace absolutely everyone who's been in contact with them, and they find that between 1 and 5% of those contacts get it. So you could be tracing 100 contacts and only one gets it. In fact, typically, each person, most people don't infect anyone. And amongst all contacts of all the people. And then if you live in the same house as someone, then 9 times out of 10 you won't get it. And indeed it's between 3 and 5%, 10%. 10% is the 9 times out of 10. It could be as little as much as 97 times out of 100 you won't get it. Even couples usually don't get it from each other. And that's why the Chinese have been able to contain this, because human-to-human transmission is largely happening in families, as they say here from the big report. And so the hospital transmissions are going on. So really, although they say to do all these precautions when you're out and about, then really you're more likely to get it at home from someone else in your own house or a visitor. And so you've got to do the same in your house as well. If there's anyone who's had any travel history, or if you're in an outbreak area, then again, wash your hands before touching your face. And keep a distance from someone who's coughing and sneezing, or you use a mask if you're actually caring for someone who's coughing and sneezing and who's got the disease. And then you need to use instructions as to how to use a mask. It's not, there's instructions on the WHO site. You have to best use the temporary ones, new one every day, take it off without touching the front and things like that, if you're using a mask properly. But nobody else needs to use a mask except to avoid infecting others. That's why you see all these people with masks on. They're wearing it to avoid affecting others, not to protect themselves. But it's actually not really that necessary, although some places require it, like in China you're required to do it. But if you keep a distance, you're not going to infect anyone, and if you cover your cough. So it typically spreads through close or prolonged contacts, and that's why Chinese have been able to contain it. And it doesn't seem you can get it from people without symptoms, or at least it's extraordinarily rare. The Chinese lady who they thought didn't have any symptoms, who gave it to some Germans, they eventually found out the people who wrote that paper never bothered to write to her and ask her if she had any symptoms. And then when later on they did write to her, someone else wrote to her, I think, then she said, oh, I did have symptoms. I had a bit of a fever and I was taking paracetamol. So it seems, although people do get it without symptoms, and you can detect it before they have symptoms, it seems it's exceedingly rare for someone without symptoms to spread it to anyone. And there's almost no genuine, you're not going to get it from a taxi driver, you're not going to get it in a bus station, you're not going to get it in an airport or on a plane, or even in the underground. Now, even for ordinary respiratory diseases like flu, you are unlikely to get it in a very short underground journey. Those tend to be more for people in the longer journeys, for 15 minutes or so. But this disease, it's very, very hard to spread it. And that is why the Chinese have been able to do all this contact tracing. And in Singapore and other countries too, now South Korea, because people who spread it normally know the person they spread it to. Either that, or they're doing something that's obviously very risky once you realise it's a problem, such as the Iranians who were sharing pipes that they smoked from one to another without washing them. So if you're doing risky practices like that, it's not too much surprising, but it needs a huge viral load, it seems, in order to infect people. And they also are now doing experiments with taking the virus from mucus and trying to infect blood in an experiment. And they find that unless there are 100,000 viruses per milliliter, that's the kind of concentration you need for mucus in order to infect blood. So people have to have an awful lot of the virus in them, and then you have to get an awful lot of it into someone else. So it's no surprise that it's actually really quite difficult to get this. So now these are about various risk factors. If you have heart disease, you can just read this. I won't read it all out. I've got some links here that you can take to various websites that are very authoritative websites. I looked for the right ones. See your doctor, of course, but have a look at these websites if you want some basic, because we're getting lots of people in the group who are asking you if I have heart disease, if I have a weakened immune system, if I have a lung disease, diabetes, I have asthma. On asthma particularly, On all of those, remember 80% of them, I don't know if I've explained yet, when you first get it in the upper respiratory tract. Oh yes, I think I did, and it's very mild, and then it doesn't. And then it's only 80% you're not going to, even if you've got a lung condition, diabetes, any of these things, then those 80% is just so mild, it's not going to get to the point. So for instance, with a heart condition, then if it gets to the point where you start getting breathless, then that affects your heart having to pump more, and so that might aggravate your heart condition. And obviously you've got a lung respiratory issue, then it's going to be a problem if you have difficulty breathing. So it's only later on, if you get the mild version, none of this applies. Even if you're old and weakened immune system, again the mild version just stays up here and doesn't do much to you. And for diabetes, then you have to manage your condition. If you're managing it well, then you're protected from it by managing it well. It's very important for diabetes to follow the rules, to monitor your blood sugar level very carefully if you're worried about getting COVID-19. With asthma, then you don't have a risk of asthma. It's not going to aggravate the later stages of the disease. The studies haven't found any risk factors, but you do have the same risk of it triggering an asthma attack that you have for cold and for flu. So just take the same precautions you do for cold and for flu to make sure that you've got your preventer. You take your preventer and you use the rescuer. And so so I've very quickly mentioned all of them. And the immune system, then you've obviously got to be very careful if you've got a weakened immune system, and just to be very careful not to get it extra, just like you do for flu. Make sure you don't get this either. So that's the main things. So then we can totally stop this. That's what I was saying about extinction in the wild. So I've got a little explanation up here as to how it is that we can stop it. So suppose you have 100 people, and then they infect. Typically, if you don't do anything about this disease, it doubles every 3 or 4 days. If people are just wandering around doing their ordinary thing and not taking any precautions to stop it. So if you start with 100 people doing that, then within 4 days there'll be 200 cases. Another 4 days there'll be 400. Another 4 days that's 800. Add that up, all that up. You've got 1,500 cases. Do this again, and you'll have into the tens, over 10,000 cases, and another 12 days later. So it's no wonder, into tens of thousands. So it's no wonder that the numbers increase rapidly if you don't stop it. But now, suppose we had only not everyone, because it's going to be difficult to get everyone to do it, but suppose you did contact tracing, picks up 75%, just missed out a quarter of them, for instance. Then you would go from 100, infects 50, infects 25, infects 12, and you're never going to reach 200. And it will soon be gone, just by contact tracing 75%, 3/4. And even if you miss out a quarter, as long as you then catch them in some other surveillance, then eventually it's just going to go away. If 3/4 of the people in the population are as careful as Bruce Aylward, then it's going to go away, no matter what the other quarter do. The reason is because it's only each person infects on average 2. So if instead each person infects on average a quarter, because 3/4 of, so like with that 100, in fact 200 new cases, but suppose 150 of those new cases were actually people who were washing their hands a lot and doing the distancing and not touching their eyes, then they wouldn't get it. So those 100 would only infect 50. And so within a certain number of weeks, in a few months, you're down to none. And so it's the same with any of these precautions. Another way you can do it is by stopping people, by detecting them very quickly. So if you have active surveillance of your entire population, and what China is now doing with its fever clinics, now what you have to do You can't be going in and knocking on everyone's doors and testing their temperatures. Well, they did do that in Wuhan, but that's a very big operation. But what you can do is just educate the public, and first of all, you've got to have the capacity to test tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people a day. Once you've done that, China eventually got up to hundreds of thousands, I think, of tests they were able to do a day. And once you've done that, once you can test lots of people in a day, then you educate the public and say, if you've got even a slight fever, then go into our fever clinic and we will test you for Covid-19 or a drive-through centre. And then in that case, so China can now capture them, can catch these diseases within 3 days of symptoms. Because people just have a bit of a fever, they go to their nearest fever clinic, they're tested, and within 3 days they found out if they've got Covid-19. If you do that, then that's knocked. So most people would not go into the hospital if at all if they've got a mild case and don't know they've got it. And even if you've got the severe case, it's about 2 weeks into the symptoms before they're getting really breathless and they say, oh, this isn't really a flu, this is a bit worse, I've got to go to a doctor. So if you can cut that back to 3 days, that's going to hugely reduce the number you infect. And again, it could just stop because of that. So this is why the WHO is saying over and over again, it is no longer a question of whether you can stop it. It is only a question of whether you will. That's what they said yesterday. That's what they said yesterday. It is not a question of whether you can stop it. This evidence is absolutely clear. It is only a question of whether you will stop it. And that's what they say. They're experts. They know what they're talking about. They've stopped many diseases. They just stopped Ebola in the Congo for the second time. And they know what they're doing. They know how to stop diseases. That is what they do as their working job every day, all through the year. They respond to 200 epidemics every year. The WHO would not say that lightly. They say very clearly, and they're absolutely certain about this. It's not a question of whether you can stop it. It is a question of whether you will. And I listen to WHO. There are all these epidemiologists, and since the very beginning, since January, early January, they've been saying this is going to rapidly go up to millions. Everyone's going to die. We can't do anything to stop it. And then the Chinese went ahead and stopped it. They say, okay, the Chinese have stopped it, but as soon as they stop doing their measures, it's going to surge up again. The Chinese have stopped doing their measures. And it is not surging up. They're stopping. They're gradually stopping. They're probably going to open Hubei. What are these people going to say next? I don't know. They keep coming up with excuses for why you don't need to do anything and just let it travel everywhere. And that's just not right. And so I said, typically spreads into closer contacts. You can't, I've gone all through all this. Almost no genuine asymptomatic community spread. You don't get it from a taxi driver. Oh yes, I was talking about diseases and things. Asthma, what else haven't I talked about? So contact tracing. Oh yes, so if you stop 3/4 of the transmissions, so this is what South Korea have done. They've stopped just about everyone who gets it. South Korea are doing rigorous contact tracing. They've got over 7,000 cases, I think, and nearly all those cases they can trace all the way back to people who came from China. So they can just trace back there. There were 36 people from this particular church that came to South Korea from China, and there were some other very early cases. And they can trace them. They can trace them all, just about nearly all of them, back to China. And you wouldn't be able to do that with flu. And it's the same with Italy. So it's not the same. Italy is now. I think most of the traces in Italy, they're also tracing back. I'm not sure now if they've got these large numbers, but they are doing exactly what China did. They are doing they're doing lots of contact tracing, they are, and the thing is, you don't need health workers to do the contact tracing. The people in the community can do that. Ordinary people in the community, they're using community organisations in Italy to do it, and civil servants. So this is a much more effective way of dealing with it than the community distancing, which Italy is also doing. But it's really the contact tracing is a really effective way of stopping this thing. So Italy looks very alarming still, but they're doing everything right, and we should eventually see something like that, though it seems to be taking rather longer to get to that phase in Italy. It's quite nerve-wracking, this disease, to start with, because it takes several days to a week or so after you do the really rigorous stopping, containing, before you notice a change in the numbers. They keep increasing because you're finding all the mild cases. If you do very rigorous testing, and you see all these mild cases, and it looks much worse. So any of those things, and you can stop it. So then finally, there's very good news from China and South Korea. There are no native Covid-19 cases in China on the 9th, and the 4 new cases were all of internal transmission, all imported. It's closing down 11 of their 16 makeshift hospitals, and then a day later they've closed down the last of the 14 hospitals built in Wuhan. So I think it's really got to the point where I don't see how anyone can even begin to doubt what this big study found 2 weeks ago, whenever it was, and a lot of the people who were saying that can't be right, but they're absolutely certain that they have stopped it. And now it's become even more and more obvious, and China's now worried about people coming back from the rest of the world, and they're going to be opening Wuhan to pretty soon to limited travel, and eventually it'll be all over. So in South Korea, it's very close, but they had a cluster of 94 cases connected to a single call centre. So that's the good news. We can definitely stop this thing. We can stop it. It's not at all a question of whether you can do it. It's just a question of whether we do it. And as your part of stopping this, then just these very simple measures I've said, then if we all do this, that by itself would stop it. We wouldn't even need the governments to do anything. If all of us just do this, washing your hands and before you touch your face, and keeping a distance from people, then within a couple of weeks it would be gone. And if 3/4 of us do this, then within weeks, months, eventually it's going to stop. So hopefully all the governments are also going to step up with the contact tracing and all that. But you can also do your part as an individual and tell everyone else to do that. And then make sure they do it properly, and not forget about it. Put a picture up on your wall, up on your door, so that as you go out you remember to do these things. Wash your hands, avoid touching your face, use a tissue for coughs or cough into your sleeve, and keep a distance from people who are sick and coughing and sneezing, and then you won't get it, and you're helping to stop anyone else from getting it too, because by not getting it yourself, that means you're not going to pass it on to anyone else either. And you're also reducing the spread of colds and flus, although if you do get a cold, don't worry, it doesn't mean that you're not doing it properly, because some colds spread through the air like SARS does, but this doesn't. So anyway, hopefully that helped, and if you're scared about this sort of thing, do join our group, Doomsday Debunked. So I did this for everyone, especially for our people in Doomsday Debunked, and it's on Facebook, and before you post there, do have a read of the rules at the top of the group, because we talk about quite difficult things. We've got some very scared people there, people who are in panic attacks and so on, And those rules, and we also have many people who are autistic, which all of those, together with the subjects that we're discussing, could have caused immense problems, and we did have problems running the group early on, but we developed these rules, and they're very important. So please read the rules at the top of the group, and then keep to them when you're posting, and then that helps everything to run smoothly. And so maybe see some of you there, and I hope this helps you.